Welcome to Blackbriar Gaming. Today we're going to discuss the many concerns I'm saying in the comments section of my Legions Imperialis videos, mostly around the way the game is releasing and what we should be expecting to pay. I'm keen to delve into these concerns, discuss what's simply common GW practice, and then talk about the decision-making process that may have gone behind their more controversial decisions. Because I like to keep these things positive, we're also going to discuss potential solutions for those that are keen to get into this game, but might not have the cash to engage with what will likely be a very expensive system. Just a quick note before we get into it, a subscribe and a like really helps us reach a bigger audience. So if you enjoyed the video, please hit those buttons down below. So, there's a lot of negativity going on in the comments, a lot more so than my usual videos. I'm a pretty positive channel, it's what I do. If you want some salt and some negativity around heresy, there's other channels out there. I am, however, realistic and pragmatic. So let's look at these concerns, discuss them a little, and talk about why they exist and what the solutions may be. So one of these things doesn't have a solution, and that's really around the way Games Workshop is going to and has so far released this game. Lot of negativity around the delay on this game. GW really shot themselves in the foot here. I remember this game was announced in July and they thought they were going to release it in August. So ambitious. Ultimately, too ambitious. There's a few things we think that have contributed to the delay. I heard today actually in a epic 30k style chat that there was actually a quote in there from a pretty controversial organization that they accidentally put in there from history. I won't delve into that, but they realized it was in there and then had to cut it out and go back. Now, I don't know whether that's true. There's also rumors that it was the quality of the rulebook. It was just too many typos and too many errors, so they had to go back for that. There was rumors around product. There wasn't enough product and capacity to create more product with all of the resources going and effort going towards 40k 10th edition, 9th edition, 10th edition. What are they up to? Oh geez, I don't even know. I bought the box. I can't even tell you what edition it is. I want to say 9th, right? Is it 9th or 10th? Doesn't matter. Either way, plenty of reasons why they delayed it. That was a big marketing and comms failure on GW's part. It really built that hype up. People were expecting it to drop in August, and then I think a lot of people became really deflated when it didn't drop. So a lot of the comments I'm seeing is that people's hype has been killed for this game. The excitement is dead. People are over it. They don't care anymore. Be patient, people. I think this is going to be such a fantastic game. I know they've stuffed the release, but geez, give it a chance when it comes out. Hopefully, when these boxes are sitting on the shelves, people are able to find some forgiveness in their heart and are able to still get excited about some really amazing tiny miniatures. Now, the other concern I'm seeing is around the core box and what's in the core box. So some people are saying they would have preferred more Marines in the box as opposed to randomly tacked on Solar Auxilia. It's a very interesting choice for Games Workshop to put both Marines and Solar in the box right from the start, the core box, as well as those Warhounds as well. I don't know whether I'm a fan of it or not. I'm not really planning on going down the Solar Auxilia route. I do have a mate that might be keen in those, so I might do some swapsies or just sell him that portion of the box. I probably would have preferred just standard Marines and more of them, much like the Heresy box set, maybe two forces, kind of, that could either be pitted against each other or turned into one big force. Would have been a bit nicer than some random mortals in there. But on the flip side, I remember seeing so much complaints around the 30k release when that dropped with the second edition box set and core set that it was just a whole bunch of Marines and how boring that was, and Marine on Marines is not interesting. So look, I don't think they could have pleased everyone with that release. What it does do is allow both Marine players and Solar players, and this is their decision-making process, I believe. What it does is allow both Marine players and Solar players to have a really nice foundation to start their army with that core box. Two people buying it each and then swapping. If one wants to go down the Solar route, one wants to go down the Marine route, they can then swap and enjoy it and get a lot more miniatures that way for their faction. And at the same time, Legions Imperialis is, of course, all about those allied detachments. So there is nothing wrong with your army having both Marines, Solar Auxilia in there. Super common. We've seen it in the battle report. There's certainly rules that support that, and very little, from my understanding at this moment, penalties around bringing other factions and allies from a rules perspective. So they've done it for a reason. I'm okay with it. They've added some diversity to the core box, which is kind of the idea with the bigger armies to make more interesting and diverse forces, and at the same time enabled players from multiple factions to get a real boost out of that core box. But yes, I do understand the contents of it are a little strange, and some people have some issues with that. It is what it is. Now, the next piece around the release that people are having issues with is the expansion that I believe we're going to see drop pretty quickly. We're of course already seeing the spoilers for that expansion, being the extra units that are coming in it. People are upset for two reasons here. One, because they're going to have to buy an extra book that's dropping right next to, we think, the initial release of that core box set. And look, it might still be a month or two between them. We don't really know yet. We'll wait and see. It is my belief it'll come out pretty rapidly after that core box drops, and there'll be a lot more releases together in this way now that it's been delayed, as opposed to what we would have seen come out in August. The other issue, of course, is that the units are split between that core rulebook and the expansion that we're seeing. I think it's the Great Slaughter. So a lot of people are saying that they would have loved to see, and that we should have seen, all of the Legion core units in the one book. This is what GW have done. They've decided to include Solar, Titans, Knights, and a bunch of Legion units in the core rulebook, and then cut it, hold it there at that initial release, and only include the units they were going to include in the initial release in that core rulebook, which comes down to a production issue, I assume, and an effort around the design work. And then those units that were going to come later on, that now might not feel so later on because of the delay, they were going to come in an expansion. Now, they've done this for a few reasons. Games Workshop doesn't like to release rules without miniatures to them, because that encourages third-party 3D printing, all those horribly evil things that Games Workshop doesn't want to see. So last thing they would have wanted to do is put rules for land speeders, for instance, in that core rulebook, and not have land speeders come out for months and months and months, 6 months down the line, perhaps when everybody's already gone out and 3D printed their own. Now, we don't usually see it in this way because, for instance, if we look at Horus Heresy 2nd Edition, all the miniatures already existed, right? It wasn't really a new system. They were releasing a few new units, but overarchingly, every single Marine unit that you wanted to run already existed either through Forge World or through Games Workshop themselves. Because this is a completely new game, these units don't exist out there. The product's not out there yet. Every single unit that they're going to include in this game, except for Titans, Knights, aircraft, they have to design and produce from scratch and get out there. So I think that's what would have gone into the consideration there, following their policy of not releasing rules without miniatures. And the other part is that you can only fit so much into a rulebook. But the rules for these units, they're pretty meaty in the way they've got the rules. That we've seen them already on the Warcom articles. And when you've got a Solar Auxilia force in there, you've got all the Knights, all the Titans, and I say all, that's probably not correct, a bunch of Knights and Titans, a bunch of Legion units, a bunch of Solar units, that book starts to become pretty thick pretty quickly. At the same time, you've got the core rules in there, obviously, all the scenarios, all the missions. There's no doubt a bunch of hobby stuff in there around this new scale. There's probably plenty of lore, because you can't assume that people understand the Heresy coming into this game. Not everyone playing this game will have played Heresy 30k 28mm system, so they had to pack a bunch in there. Now, could they have included another 10 Marine units? Probably. I'm not going to say they ran out of space, but maybe they did. Maybe they had a hard limit on the amount of pages they could include in here, and these units just didn't make the cut for that reason, rather than the time and policy around miniatures and rules. So there was a lot in there already. Could they have included some more? I'm sure they could have. I definitely understand the frustration about having a Legion army and having to go between two books for really those core units. That sucks. It is what it is, but I'll talk a bit around a solution on that soon. Now, the other thing I see people worried about is around the Legion units. So far, we haven't seen anything around Legion-specific units. That is, those units that belong to specific legions that we see in traditional 28mm heresy. So, as an example, if we think about Emperor's Children, there's no Palatine Blades or Cacophony or those kind of units being talked about, mentioned, or even hinted at 8mm, unless I've missed something. And if I have, please tell me in the comments, because that would get me so excited. So we don't know if they're going to include them, and this is some concerns that people are putting out there. Are they going to include these very Legion-specific units? And the answer might be no. Primarchs is the big one. People want to see Primarchs. Now, I would be very shocked if we didn't see very tiny Primarchs coming out at some stage. I'm sure that'll be a thing, but when it comes to Legion-specific units, they might not want to redo them all. I imagine if they did do them, it'd certainly be in resin through Forge World. Everything at the moment, unless I'm incorrect, is coming out in plastic for these tiny miniatures. Maybe I've missed something there, but I'm pretty sure it's all plastic, which is just fantastic and so exciting. So much nicer to work with and afford than Forge World resin. But if these Legion-specific units do come out, they will be resin. They might come out, they might not, because of the scale and I guess the minimal impact that each unit has respectively on the table compared to a 28mm system. They might have decided that going Legion-specific units, they couldn't justify differentiating them enough. They wouldn't want to add layers of special rules for each unit in this type of game where it's really massed armies. So the decision might have been made to not go down Legion-specific units, and it's not necessarily the wrong decision. Now, it reduces a bunch of flavor, and certainly if I was running a White Scars army, which I certainly want to, maybe I just paint up my Terminators as their Legion-specific. Is it the Sagna Marzen? No. What's the Legion-specific unit? I can't even remember. It's been a long day. But maybe that's how you do it, right? You get in there, you do a bit of conversion work, you do some 3D printing, and you just count as those Legion-specific units just as regular units, because in the end, those individual minis are so tiny. Any kind of special rules would have a minimal impact on the table, and you don't want to be remembering so many special rules for each unit in a game like this, where you've got 24 different types of units on the table, as opposed to maybe 6 or 7 in a normal game of Heresy. So that's Legion-specific units. I don't think there will be faction Legion-specific units out there. We'll wait and see. I guess we'll see what the Games Workshop decide to do. Now, that's that. The biggest concern, though, as we'll get into it now, is the cost. People are already stressing out about it. We don't know any of the costs whatsoever. That core box will not be cheap. It certainly won't be less than $350 dues. I remember seeing in a chat someone saying, "Oh, geez, I hope it's $150." Mate, you are kidding yourself. There is no world where this box is $150, and I guess people have to be a little realistic when we're talking about this. I have no doubt, however, that it's going to cost an absolute arm and a leg. Usually they try and give you a pretty good deal with the core boxes and the release sets. Certainly Heresy 2nd Edition, that box that released with all the Marines and the Spartan, that was a fantastic deal, especially when you can get a discount on it. So I'm fingers crossed. I'm really hoping we see a good deal on that box. I'd love to see it for $350, but it might be more. And the thing is, this game, it's going to be expensive, people. And it's hard, right? So let's think about it. So if we look at Aeronautica as an example, so 6 Xiphons used to be $80 dues. Australian dollars. When they re-release them, repackaged, geez, I'd love them to still be $80. That'd be nice, but it's probably going to go up a little as well. They're probably going to slap another $10 to $20 on each of those Aeronautica boxes as they release them. Same, 2 Fire Raptors, $80. Maybe that turns into $100 as they re-release them. So we can start to look at that and have a good idea of how they're going to price Legions Imperialis. So if you look at the boxes, for instance, the Dreadnoughts with the Rapiers that will go into one box, or the Land Speeders with the bikes that will go into one box, those boxes, there is no way they're costing less than $80. I'd say probably more likely $100 for those boxes. So that starts to give you an idea of what you're going to pay for an army. If we look at the and if we compare to the 6 Siphons, I mean, one could then assume that 6 Predators will be, once again, around that $80 to $100 mark. If we look at the 2 Fire Raptors for $80 to $100, we can then assume that 2 Kratos are going to be around that $80 to $100 mark. So, taking that logic, if we then look at the 3,000 point Blood Angel army in the White Dwarf, that thing, and we've seen some rumors around how much that costs, but using my logic here, I'm not gonna go into the rumors, but using my logic here, there's no way that thing's gonna cost any less than 1,500 Australian dollars. At least. Those drop pods, in particular, coming in boxes of 4, I think they're gonna be super pricey, and you're not paying a lot of points for them. The Death Guard army that we see in there, I think that'll be a little cheaper, but you're still probably looking at $1,000. People, this is not going to be a cheap game. Games Workshop are in the absolute throes of charging so much money for their miniatures because they can, and I think we have to expect this going. Now, I'm not saying that's a fantastic thing or we should be positive about it, but I think if you want to play this game, you're going to have to be a little realistic about how much things are going to cost, or you're going to have to look at alternate options, which I will get to soon. So, look, is $1,500 a reasonable cost for an army that probably fits in a shoebox? I don't think so. But the issue is the cost isn't representative of the plastic or resin that goes into that army. And I think in that way, Legions Imperialis is going to really struggle from a value for money perspective. People are going to look at those tiny little tanks and go, how in the world is that worth the same as a much bigger unit from Warhammer 40k? But the issue is the price of these things isn't necessarily in the actual plastic or the actual resin itself. A lot of it comes into the design, the tooling, the packaging, the distribution, and I dare say that unfortunately, I don't think any of those costs become much less with a smaller scale game. And that's why I think these units are going to feel overinflated in their price, and I don't think they're going to feel like value for money because Games Workshop have to make their money back from the design piece, and there's not going to be a lot of resources, that is plastic or resin, in these things, but they're still going to cost quite a bit of money. I think it's going to hurt the game, honestly, and it's going to really kind of stop growth in the community early on because of that cost. So it'll be disappointing. It is what it is. We'll wait and see. I don't want to doom and gloom too much around that one. We'll wait and see what the costs are, and we'll have another chat about that when it comes out. So what's the solution here? I don't want to just be super negative and talk about the problems. I want to talk about how we get into this game. I'm super into Epic Scale. I really want to play it, and I think a lot of other people do too. I think this game system is going to be a lot of fun and possibly one of GW's best designed games. However, I also don't want to drop $1,500 on a bunch of tiny miniatures the size of my fingernail. So I see 3 main solutions here. 1, play smaller games. It potentially cuts you out of tournaments if you don't collect towards that 3,000 point mark. You may not get the full experience of the large scale battle game with a lot of things dying all at once, but I reckon 1,500 to 2,000 points will be very meaningful games and still be a lot of fun. I think they will play a lot better from a maneuverist perspective when it comes to objective-based games on bigger boards, and I think you're still going to get the vibe, the feeling of the game. So playing smaller games, of course, means you're spending less on miniatures, not collecting a 3,000 point force, more so 1,500, 2,000, and you're going to be able to obviously cut your costs that way. So that is solution number 1. Play small games, at least maybe to begin with. Build up your force over time if you so wish. But when doing local events, even if you have a hand in organizing them, organize smaller events as well. No one wants to be playing a 3-hour game at a local event. So it may be that smaller points are actually better for the time of the game as well. We'll have to wait and see. That's solution 1. Solution 2, buy smart. I think there's going to be certain units in this game that give you more points, more bang for your buck, if you will. Drop pods in particular look like they just absolutely drive the cost of this game up. I don't think you even have to pay for them in certain detachments. I could be wrong, but they're going to come 4 drop pods to, let's say $80. That's a good outcome, I think. And if that's the case, and you need a dozen drop pods, that's going to just really drive the cost of this game up right from the start. So my advice would be buy smart, focus on the core box units that you get originally, maybe buy a core box with a mate. That is, you each buy one, and then one of you goes solo, one of you goes Legion, or Astartes, if you will. And then you get your army built up in that way, probably a cheap way to do it. Another good way to get a bunch of points into your army for cheap is to look at the Titans. So a second-hand Titan, in particular, I jumped on eBay quickly and had a look at the Reaver Titans, which we know are around 400 points in this game. A huge chunk of points compared to what you're paying for a Space Marine. And look, you can get a Reaver still on sprue for like $50 on eBay. People, that's Australian dollars. That's just good value when you can buy a, a sixth almost of your army for $50. That feels good, especially if you're playing smaller point games at the same time. Yes, you can only have 25% of your force as is either as an allied contingent full stop or as Titans. I can't remember the exact ruling around that, but there is certainly a limit on allies / Titans that you can bring to the game. It might have just been Titans, I'm not sure. So look, you can't just go bulk Titans and a few Marines. There probably will eventually be rules to run all Titan lists, and certainly there was an article about that. What did it say? It might have even said that early on we're going to see rules around running fully Titan armies. So that will definitely be a cheaper way to play this game if you have a whole bunch of Titans on the board and maybe just some troops then to support to keep people away from their feet. So that's a great way to do it. Another good high point unit is flyers. Those flyers look pretty expensive point wise, and you can get a bunch of maybe secondhand or an aeronautica. That's a real word. Units and get them onto the table for a reasonable price as well. Maybe doing all of that, going bargain basement with your units, you can get a 3,000 point force together for I don't know, $600 to $800. Look, it still doesn't feel fabulous, but not outrageous for a Games Workshop game. We have to accept this stuff's expensive, right? It will result in less diverse armies if you do go down this route, and certainly you might not get to play with some of the cooler stuff that's coming out. So pros and cons, but that is one way, solution two, to get into this game for a little bit cheaper. Now, option 3, it's the obvious one. It's always sitting there, 3D printing. This game lends itself so well to 3D printing. The miniatures being a lot smaller, you're not too concerned about detail, you're not too concerned about accuracy, because the details are so small and generic, as it were. You're not gonna stress out about that 3D printed kind of look as you do for 28mm compared to the 8mm games that we'll be playing. And it feels pretty good to spend 60 cents on resin for half a dozen rhinos instead of $80 on the plastic version in a pretty box. So 3D printing, it's a thing. I've got some 3D printed rhinos that I've been test painting and having a bunch of fun with it. But the issue, of course, is that if no one buys the product, the game won't continue to get design support. There's probably a sweet spot in the middle here where you 3D print the more ridiculously costed miniatures. Once again, if those drop pods are for $80, surely they'll be cheaper. Surely. We'll wait and see. I think there's going to be some laughter happening when we start to see some of these prices. Maybe, and you want, 16 drop pods or whatever for your force, maybe you 3D print those and splash some cash on some other units just to make sure Games Workshop can see the game being supported. They've got some money coming in for it, so we at least get a few more books out of them before they realize they've made a terrible mistake. But otherwise, 3D print those miniatures that are more expensive and a bit of a pain to collect otherwise. So there's 3 solutions for saving some money on this game and still being able to get into it, because I have to play this game, people. It looks too good, too much fun to not play. The other thing I wanted to talk about is the rulebooks. So we did mention this before, but the multiple rulebooks is another issue, but certainly not one that's new to Games Workshop. I am a sucker for pretty books, so I will buy anything they throw at me if it looks like a good-looking rulebook. But paying for rules is something that I think we can all agree Games Workshop has to stop. It's just not the done thing for gaming companies in 2023. It's not a modern way of doing things. Having them not free in a digital version, it just feels ridiculous. I think they're slowly getting there and they understand this. Certainly the latest version of 40k, I still can't remember if it's 9th or 10th. 9th, right? It is 9th. No, maybe it's 10th. Ugh. The core rules for that are free. And we see with a bunch of their game releases at the moment, they release a compendium in PDF generally for your older armies so that you can still play them with the new version or whatever that new type of game is. That's what they're going to do with the old world. We'll get a bunch of PDFs with the older armies in there that we don't have the rulebooks for. So they're kind of dabbling in that space of playing with free rules and giving some of the rules out for free. But I dare say we're going to have to pay for these books, and that's the only place the rules are going to be. So, the way to get around this, and look, at the same time, you don't want to carry a bunch of books around with you. It's for Horus Heresy. I was playing with a Alpha Legion force with some Allied Mechanicum. I'm carrying almost 5 kilos of books around just to be able to play that army. It gets silly at that point. So the answer here, I get the frustration. The answer is Battlescribe, people. If you're not using Battlescribe, then what are you doing? Stop complaining about the books. Stop complaining about the rules, having to carry multiple books around. Just download Battlescribe. It's not illegal or anything. I don't think. Awkward if it is. But essentially, you download Battlescribe, you chuck the information in there from the database, and suddenly you get to put your units in there. And it tells you the points costs, and it tells you the rules, and it's got everything in there. Now, it will take some time, I dare say, for a Battlescribe Imperialis database situation, whatever you want to call it, app. I don't know what the name for it is, but it'll take some time for that to come out. So that won't be an immediate solution. But eventually, I dare say someone will jump on that Battlescribe piece, put it together, and we'll be able to have that instead of a whole bunch of rulebooks. Battlescribe, check it out, people. And that's about it. That's all I want to talk about. I've gone through the concerns. I've looked at some solutions that hopefully maybe people will think about. Surely you're all thinking about these already, but if you weren't, maybe I've helped you out. Thank you so much for watching. Let me know in the comments how much you think this game is going to cost and what your plans are for getting around that exorbitant buy-in. Importantly, make sure to keep rolling those dice and getting hyped for Heresy.